We are just one day away from the release of EA College Football 26, and I don't know about you, but the excitement is through the roof for me. Can't wait to finally get my hands on this game. I've been waiting way too long for it to come out. But before it comes out, I wanted to do one last video about what you can do to make your Dynasty experience the best it can possibly be. So I'm going to give you an updated list of house rules to use for your Dynasty. Now you may be thinking, didn't this guy just release a house rules video not a month ago? And yes, I did, but during that time, I got a lot of questions about some specific rules that I had in that video. I learned a lot about what other people do, and we had a whole Dynasty deep dive that added new things and features to the game that I need to talk about because they give you customization, and with customization comes the need for house rules to give you a better Dynasty experience. So in this video, I'm going to clarify some of those rules. I'm going to add rules from the previous video and talk about some of the new features and how you should implement them into your Dynasty in College Football 26. So first, let's actually start with the Dynasty setup. So you're going to want to put your coach progression on either slow or slowest. If you're really trying to do a rebuild, you shouldn't be able to unlock an entire skill tree within your first season. Now, there are an increase in purchase price for each tier and for each actual skill. It's 8 points now instead of 5, so that's going to add some increased difficulty in getting some of those skills. But you really want those early seasons to be a grind. It's the journey that matters, not the destination. And that's kind of the cliche way of saying it, but you really want to enjoy those first couple of years where you go from this one-star program to a 4-star, 5-star powerhouse that's consistently winning national championships and maintaining everything that you built in those early seasons. So doing the slow or slowest coach progression is going to allow you to do that. Personally, I like the slow one. I think it's a good balance between not having to take forever to see some sort of improvement in your coach abilities, but also making sure that it is that slow grind. Continue using auto progression, but if you do want to use manual progression for whatever reason, you need to have that 25% tax or even higher. I mean, when I watched Bordeaux's video, when he was rebuilding the Ball State Cardinals and he went manual progression and put that on 0, it really opened my eyes to the kind of cheesing that you can do. And he did a few extra things that just aren't probably going to happen in your Dynasty. But what he did was essentially saved up a bunch of points and then threw them all on the team in 1 year and put a bunch of guys to 90-plus overalls. That is cheesing, and it really, like, if you want to play that way, that's fine, but if you want a true, like, immersive, realistic Dynasty experience, continue to use auto progression. The reason why I prefer auto progression over the manual progression is because it's random, and random is a good thing in your Dynasty. It makes players feel unique to your specific Dynasty, and it allows them to have essentially their own personality. If you always upgrade the same attributes, which would happen if you were doing manual progression, every player is essentially the same at that position. Keeping it auto will maintain that uniqueness. It will allow different players to leave different legacies at your school, and that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve. Number 3 in this section is to play on Heisman and use sliders if you need to. This is a carryover from that last video, but it's so important that I'm going to reiterate it again. The only way you're going to get better at this game is if you challenge yourself. And playing on Heisman is the best way that you can challenge yourself, even if you're just learning. And if you're brand new to the game, progressively build yourself up to where you understand the mechanics of the game. It can get a better grasp on how the actual game works before you start to challenge yourself. But if you're already a baseline, you understand the ins and outs of the mechanics of the game, you need to be playing on Heisman. It is going to give you the best challenge early on in those seasons to really, like we talked about, make it a grind. You should not be winning a bunch of games in year one. In fact, making a bowl game, depending on what team you use, making a bowl game should feel like an accomplishment in and of itself. Just being 6-6. Like, that is how you want it to feel. And in terms of sliders, I wanted to mention, them again, because I play on sliders. I think sliders are the best way to get the best overall experience from the gameplay. And I mentioned that I use Mat 10 sliders, but then I had a lot of people comment on the video and say Sim Gaming Network slider set is really good, and they would recommend using that instead of Mat 10. So, you figure out which one works best for you. Early on, there's going to be people that are just solely dedicating their time to creating slider sets that give you the best overall gaming experience on that Heisman difficulty. You should absolutely take advantage of those people because it allows you to have a more enjoyable experience for really no extra cost, right? You don't have to put time into it. You don't have to put effort into it. Somebody else will do it for you. You just get to reap the benefits. Realistic quarter length and play clock acceleration combo. So this was also another carryover, but I wanted to even break it down more and talk about kind of what I do and some of the other things that I've seen people do. So in the average college football game, you're looking at anywhere between 110 and 180 plays on average. So it's a super wide range because in college football, you have your service academies that have about 60, sometimes less than 60 plays a game on the offensive side of the ball. And then you have your teams like Ole Miss that take like 17 seconds in between plays before they've ran another one. So you really want to be able to capture the variety that college football is, but you also want to do it in a way that makes sense and doesn't balloon stats, because at the end of the day, it is a video game. And so what I would say is that you're really trying to capture that end range of play so that 110 to like 145, 150 is really that sweet spot, depending on the type of offense you play, the tempo that you're playing at, the opponent you're playing in that game. But whatever you decide within that play range is the best for you, that's what you should go with. So I typically play on 11-minute quarters or 12-minute quarters with 15-second accelerated play clock. This allows me to still see stuff pre-snap and make adjustments if I need to, but it doesn't, keep the game dragging on forever. I feel like it does a pretty good job of giving you the correct amount of possessions in each quarter, and if it is one of those low-scoring, high time of possession games per drive, it feels like that. I've noticed it also helps with wear and tear. It feels more natural, and it allows for ebbs and flows in gameplay. So you start out super hot. You're going to have to maintain that throughout the game. You're going to have natural dips where you maybe punt a few drives. It's just things that you see in real football that you try and replicate within the game, and I think that this range is the best way to do it. Number 5 is to just really challenge yourself with roster retention. So the default sliders for the new transfer portal feature in College Football 26 are a max of 20 players transferring per team per year and a 55% chance for both the CPU and user players to transfer. As you start to get more familiar with how it actually works and how many people are leaving your team every single year and what you're able to do roster retention wise, you can fine tune this, but I think I'm going to start out with a max of 25 players. Being able to leave and just making that roster retention difficult, but not impossible. So I feel like that's the happy medium because the max is 30. So 25, I feel like, is a good spot. If I find that, hey, I'm really struggling to just retain anybody, then you drop it down. Or if you feel like it's not enough and you want more of that movement during the offseason, you can even up it, right? I do think that the 55% is a solid starting point, but I would think about moving it down to 50% just so it really feels more like a coin flip, that if a guy pops up of at risk for transfer, it's a 50% chance that he leaves rather than a 55. It's just a coin flip thing to me. It makes sense in my head. It might not to you, but this is, an option, and I think that they've done a pretty good job of creating that base. Now, I will say from what we've seen so far from the videos from the EA Creator Network YouTubers that have been able to post stuff, the transfer portal seems a little out of whack. Like they almost went too far to the other end of the spectrum, where in College Football 25, nobody transferred. It feels like everybody's transferring now. Like I was watching, I think it was C4's video on the transfer portal, and this was at the 20 max 20 players per team, the 55% chance. Dylan Stewart, Colin Simmons, Leonard Moore, Arch Manning, DJ Lagway, Jordan Seaton, Isaac Brown, and Aaron Noland all entered the transfer portal in year one. I'm sorry, but that's just not going to happen. And so there has to be some sort of fine-tuning from the people at EA, I think, before we really get too deep on these in just making them better, because there's just no way that Texas loses both Colin Simmons and Arch Manning this year. It's just not going to happen. And the same thing with South Carolina and Dylan Stewart. Like, those guys are not leaving their programs. And I think that having those guys be in the transfer portal is fun for your dynasty experience, but that's not realistic in my opinion. So I think that there needs to be some sort of better fine-tuning for those initial period of players, but I think as the seasons go on, it'll start to, figure itself out within your dynasty. So the final thing that was a really big question in my other video was the coordinator playbooks. So I mentioned using your coordinator playbooks instead of choosing your own because it brings another interesting dynamic of building out your coaching staff and having another layer of things to think about when you do hire a guy. However, you still can't see the specific playbook for a coordinator. It's just, here is their offensive scheme, which is a really annoying thing that I wish they would fix because they had it in NCAA 14. You can attack this one of two ways. You can either use the generic style playbook that they have, or you can use a playbook that has that same scheme and philosophy. So an example would be if you hire an offensive coordinator that has an offensive scheme of air raid, you can either use the generic air raid playbook or go through the playbook list and see which playbooks have air raid and then choose from there. So in this case, you could pick like Clemson. That is the best fix that I found. Now, you don't have to do that. It really is up to how much of a challenge that you want. But personally, I like having that kind of dynamic of learning a new playbook when my offense does well because my coordinator leaves. And again, you can choose one side of the ball, both sides of the ball. It is up to you. Okay, now let's talk about recruiting in your dynasty. So the first thing we're going to talk about is scouting. And instead of no scouting, because a lot of people were not a fan of that, you can use one scouting session per player. So when you go to scout a player, you just hit ARX one time. And whatever information is revealed from that time is what you have on that player for that recruiting cycle. And I actually think this is a really good middle ground between the people that were scouting everything and the people that weren't scouting anything, because the way that scouting works now in college football 26 is that every position reveals in the same way. So you'll be able to compare players with somewhat tangible information, so you'll have some of their ratings, but you won't know everything, and instead you'll have those ranges pop up, because let's be honest, when a college team is recruiting a high school player, they do not know every single rating that player has as it translates to college football. They have an idea, right? They have a range in which it could be, but they have no idea how it'll actually translate. When I actually came up with this house rule, the no scouting in NCAA 14, it was because you could see the letter grades for the players and have a decent idea of what they offered before scouting them. And it allowed you to know what you were getting into and really pick who you wanted to go after just based off those letter grades. They also allowed you to scout them after they committed too, so you could have an idea of, what you got after that player committed and decide if you needed to go after another player at that position during that recruiting cycle because that one was actually a flop. Those are things that I wish they brought back that we could do, but with what we have right now, I believe that this is the best fix. Only go after guys interested in you, in your home state, or at the same star level as your school prestige. You can use all three of these, a combination or only one. It is completely up to you. These are just my recommendations to make it a little more immersive / challenging. With recruiting seeming to be a little bit more difficult this year than it was last year, at least on the surface level from what we've seen so far, widening your pool of potential prospects might be better for your overall experience. So you could also go after guys from your pipelines, but for me, it's a little much just because you have so many pipelines. It widens the pool almost too much to allow you to go after basically anybody you want at that point. And once you become a 4-star school, this is another house rule that I would implement to just challenge yourself a little bit more, because you're going to be able to have your pick of the litter, essentially. Only go after guys that are interested in you, because the idea is that if you've taken a 1-star program and made them a 4-star school, your coach is also in a really good spot in terms of their recruiting. You probably have a really good staff around them as well, so you won't have a challenge in recruiting the guys that you want in the first place. So you need to restrict that pool of players that you have access to make it a little bit tougher for you to get that talent on your team. Use visits for your top prospects. Last year, visits felt like a waste of resources because they each cost 40 points. And if you're a 1-star school, you really couldn't afford 40-point visits with your limited recruiting budget. Now that they are much more affordable, you should use them. Honestly, the only reason that I didn't use them last year was because of the economical impact on my recruiting budget that just didn't make feasible sense. But it is realistic to have certain weeks, home games specifically, circled as big visit weeks where it's more at stake than just getting a win in that specific game. You have recruits that you need to impress. And because you're now able to actually bring guys on visits and it not take a massive chunk out of your recruiting budget, you should. You can schedule up to 4 visits per week, and because of those varying costs, you should try to give yourself a dead set goal on how many guys you need to bring on a visit every single year. It's like a benchmark that you create for yourself just to give a little extra challenge and have those big visit weeks sprinkled in throughout the season. The formula to figure out what your goal should be roughly is take the amount of home games that you have in a given season. So likely it'll be 6. Sometimes you'll have 7 or 8. Rarely will you have 5, but it's a possibility. So take that number, subtract 2, and then multiply it by 4. So if you have 6 home games in a given season, subtract 2, which gives you 4, and then times that by 4 gives you 16. So that should be your rough goal of guys to bring in on visits, 16, because you can also schedule visits for bye weeks, and you have 2 bye weeks built into your schedule. And so you'd be able to bring those guys in for that as well. But this way, it allows you to have a benchmark of, okay, here are all the guys I need to bring on a visit during this season to just give myself a little bit of an extra challenge. And the way you decide to police yourself on this is completely up to you. Again, this is just a suggestion for a more immersive / challenging experience in your dynasty. Because there's also a question of if you have a guy scheduled for a visit later in the season, but he commits before he takes the visit, does that actually count? And that's completely up to you because you did spend the points on that visit. They were points that you can't get back. But it also is a guy that didn't actually take the visit. If you want to count it, count it. If you don't want to count it, don't count it. You don't even have to do this. This is just something that I think could be an added obstacle, an added challenge to make your dynasty experience more fun and immersive. Deal breakers are fun and new, but don't focus solely on them because in Bordeaux's rebuild of Ball State, he really only focused on guys that had that proximity to home deal breaker that aren't going to change in a way that will force them to transfer. So you can play that way, but in my opinion, it's a little unrealistic to do so. You want to go after a wide variety of deal breakers because it's going to give you a much more realistic roster management experience, having to retain guys that care about being on a championship contender, care about how you play the game, care about the brand exposure that they're getting. Those are things and players that you have to deal with on a daily basis as a college football head coach, and I think that you should do your best to maintain that kind of integrity during your dynasty. Now, I'm not saying don't go after guys that are proximity to home, and I actually think that this should be a useful asset for you when you get into a situation where you really like 2 prospects and they're kind of similar in what they offer. You can't really decide which one to go after, but one is a playing style deal breaker and the other one is a proximity to home deal breaker. I would 100% take the proximity to home deal breaker. You know that guy is more likely to stick around, probably guaranteed to stick around, than the playing style guy. So for that purpose, go with the proximity to home guy, but don't only focus on proximity to home guys, was my entire point there. So now we're going to talk about the gameplay settings that you should use in order to give yourself a more realistic on-field experience. So you want to use the placement or classic passing styles. The idea behind this is that you want your QB's ratings to control as much as they possibly can. This is going to allow every QB you have on your team throughout the length of your dynasty to have a unique feel and force you to take all of their stats into consideration when you're recruiting them, when you're deciding who you want to start. Now, I prefer placement passing for the fact that you have a little bit more control over the layering of throws because there's really no QB stat in the game that measures that. So I feel like that's an advantage that you should offer yourself. The classic passing is essentially what it was in NCAA 14, either a bullet or a lob pass, no real in between. And the CPU has the ability to layer those kinds of passes, so it's not something that the CPU doesn't have access to, which is why I prefer that placement style passing. Audibles, hot routes, and other pre-snap adjustments. A lot of people weren't fans of my no hot routes house rule from the last video, and I get why, but I don't think they really understood the reason why I had it in there in the first place. the CPU doesn't make defensive audibles. So if they come out and press pre-snap and I don't have a play call that has a go ball, then I can send that receiver on a go ball every single time and not have to face consequences because of that. Whereas if I come out and have that house rule for myself, well, then I just didn't call the right play for that given situation that the defense was in. It's more of a chess match. It forces me to be more detailed in my play calling. So in combination with some of the comments that I saw in the last video, I believe I've come up with a really solid way to meld the two schools of thought together. So the big stat that you're going to want to look out for on your quarterbacks is awareness. That is going to be the thing that dictates what I'm about to talk next. If your QB has a 0 to a 69 awareness rating, you cannot pre-snap audible. No matter what it is, you cannot do anything. I'm talking pass protection, I'm talking hot routes, I'm talking about audibling in general. A quarterback of that caliber likely is not of the mind to be able to do that stuff pre-snap. So just no pre-snap audibles, period. If they are a 70 to a 79 in that rating, you can call pass protections and hot route your running back. Because hot routing your running back is essentially having somebody else in pass protection, right? So giving you that ability to, have them, call swings or have them stay into block on pass protections or slide your offensive line. That is a pretty simple thing that I think quarterbacks with that awareness rating in that range would be able to do. Once you get into the 80 to 89 range, you can call pre-snap audibles and flip plays. So if you don't like the formation you're in, given what the defense is showing you, you can now change the formation. You can change the play call, flip the play to the direction that you want to run it to based off the defensive alignment. Once you get to a 90 plus, you can do everything else, and you can also hot route now. So it's going to allow those special QBs with those 90 plus ratings that are smart on paper feel smart on the game. Because when you're looking at the computer controlled quarterbacks in the game, that awareness rating is essentially, it's not pre-snap stuff, but it's post-snap. It's how well they read the defense. It's how well they get the ball out on time and know where they're going to go with the football. Because you're the one controlling the quarterback on your side of the ball when you're on offense, the awareness rating essentially doesn't matter at all. Like it could be 0 and your quarterback could have 99 everything else and they would play phenomenally. If the CPU is like that, it wouldn't work out that way. And so this way, it makes it so that the awareness rating actually matters for your quarterback in a way that we can use to help or hurt us during the actual game. Now, it's completely up to you what your tiers look like. These are the ones that I came up with because I feel like the levels make sense with the actual natural progression that you get to, and it makes those 90-plus awareness quarterbacks feel super special when they do come through your program. Like, that's the idea, is we want those players that are special to feel special and not like every other player that we've had before them. Use formation subs. So you're going to get 50 of them in the season before you actually start. Utilize it to get players in the game that fit what you're trying to do. And the best way to describe this is if you have a gadget type player that you want to run on a jet sweep out of a specific formation, put him out there in that specific formation so that way you don't have to think about it when it comes to the game. You just know, hey, this is the formation that I want to run this out of, and I've got the guy that's best suited for that specific play in that spot. An added plus is that it just gives you the natural rotation that you look for when you're looking at fatigue and wear and tear stuff. Speaking of wear and tear, use those subs realistically because I think it's a great new feature to have. And the way that I'm going to do it, and this is not that you have to do it, but this is the way that to me feels the most realistic. Keep them fresh in early non-conference games that aren't important to the schedule at large. So when you're talking about your home opener against FCS West, have it on, keep them fresh so that you're getting a lot of guys snaps, playing time's going up, you're getting a good feel for what your other guys are capable of doing. You keep them healthy for the duration of the rest of the season. You just grind it out in those big rivalry games or once you get to the postseason to really have your best 11 guys on the field at all times. And then a mix of two during conference play so that way, you're making sure that you're still winning your conference games, but the guys aren't going to be dead by the time you get to the postseason or by the time you get to those rivalry games or your conference championship game. So doing those in a realistic way is going to give you a great experience overall, and it's actually going to help you throughout the actual season. Because if you have grinded out on for every single game, by the time you get to game 12, say that's your biggest, it's rivalry week, say that's your biggest game, your guys are going to be cooked, and they're just not going to be as good as they could possibly be if you did a good job early in the season of having rotation on automatically so that you keep guys fresh. And the last thing I want to talk about is making this dynasty yours. So in conjunction with everything that we've talked about, I also advise you to keep track of where you're finishing in recruiting. What big recruits that you land, where they start overall-wise, where they finish. Same with their school. If they transferred, have a list of what schools they went to. Keep a spreadsheet of every game that you play. The final score, the opponent, the location, the stakes of that game. Do the same with your conference standings, where you finished every single year. Look at your conference standings every single year and just mark it down where everybody finished. This is going to give you storylines. It's going to give you rivalries. It's just going to give you a better connection overall to your dynasty in a way that is going to actually make you want to continue to play, because I know a lot of people will eventually hit a wall in their dynasties where it feels like, oh, I've won the national championship. I've now won 2 national championships in a row, and this conference has become too easy for me. It's because there's no connection there to the players on the team or connection to the actual universe that you've created. By keeping track of these things and seeing what storylines come from them, you are now able to have other goals that you want to achieve. You have other storylines that you just want to follow as you continue to play. These are just things that I've found over the course of time to really get me so much more invested in the dynasty that I'm currently in and want to continue playing and see how things play out. It really is just a recommendation from a guy who loves to play the dynasty mode for people that are looking to get into it and stay into it for the entirety of the season. That is all I have for you today. Remember to hit that subscribe button on your way out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Catch you on the flip. See you.